When I was a teenager, the hottest animes in town were Bleach, Naruto, and, of course, Death Note. I am also familiar with all of these titles. Although, in all honesty, the only one I actually finished was Death Note. Bleach did me dirty, and I didn't have the energy to keep up with Naruto. Anyway, the point is, Death Note was super popular when I was younger, and I actually liked it. In fact, I still really like it, and like most people, I was upset when Netflix announced that they were going to be making a movie. Mostly because, along with that announcement came the announcement of who was going to be playing Light, and it was obvious that they had every intention of whitewashing the cast and the story, which is where most of the outrage came from. Now, while these are not the best decisions to make when adapting a popular series with lots of really rabid fans, I have to say these are probably not the worst decisions that went into the making of this movie. So, let's talk about that. My channel is slowly becoming a collection of Netflix reboot critiques. Does this mean I have to watch the Bleach movie now? If that live-action Cowboy Bebop movie isn't good, I'm gonna lose it. Anyway, I know the content of this video is not particularly relevant since this movie came out back in 2017. But listen, I'm a historian. Nothing I do is relevant for any sort of algorithm, okay? It's facts. Alright, here we go. So, Death Note was originally a manga written by Tsugumi Oba and illustrated by Takeshi Obata. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The series ran from December of 2003 to May of 2006. The series follows Light Yagami, a boy who finds a Death Note. Death Notes are notebooks that belong to Shinigami, or gods of death. And they're used to end human lives. The Death Note Light picks up was dropped by Ryoka, a particularly bored Shinigami. So Ryoka is pretty unhappy with how things are in the Shinigami world and manages to get a hold of 2 Death Notes. So he decides, for funsies, he's gonna drop one in the human world, just to see what happens. Light is a bored high school student who happens to pick up the Death Note that Ryoka drops. At first he doesn't believe it can actually kill people the way the instructions in the front say it can, but then he ends up using it and realizes that the power of this note is real, and then he decides to use it to try and get rid of all of the criminals in the world. This leads to a series of events that pits Light against L, the world's greatest detective, and ultimately it becomes a sort of metaphor and discussion for the dichotomy between good and evil and the corrupting nature of power. You know, some pretty serious, deep stuff, if you think about it too hard, like I do with everything. The series has inspired several spin-off novels, movies, and even video games. What's important for today's discussion, though, is the fact that there are, in fact, several direct adaptations of the original manga. This includes the well-known anime that ran between October 2006 and June 2007 with a total of 37 episodes, a 2006 live-action adaptation that covered the first half of the series, the sequel to that live-action adaptation that also came out in 2006 and roughly covered the second half of the series, called Death Note 2, The Last Name. There was also a live-action television show in 2015, a musical also in 2015, and of course, the 2017 Netflix movie. In my first video, I talked about Saint Seiya and how it's a series that's popular enough to be constantly getting new installments and how those installments add to the series. Death Note is a lot like that. It's super popular, and aside from the adaptations, there are a lot of new installments and spin-offs that just keep people coming back. Which apparently makes a series prime fodder for a bad Netflix reboot. Which I guess we should actually talk about. Alright, so I have some notes and some bullet points, and we are going to work through them. So, for starters, I feel like at some point this movie, like in the production of this movie, it was meant to be a sequel. The rough draft of the script or the storyboarding phase, someone was like, hey, this should be a sequel to the original. Because at some point, Light manipulates a bunch of criminals into leaving a message that says Kira has returned, which doesn't make sense in a universe where Kira never existed. Like, how can he return if he wasn't around before? You're just saying. Also, there's a lot of names already in the Death Note when Light picks it up, which to me implies, you know, the obvious implication. It's been used before, and there's also this really ominous message about how you shouldn't trust Ryuk. So, like, someone used it before, but then, you know, it's all kind of glossed over, and it's obviously like a reboot. But those things made it to the final cut, and it's sort of weird. And I think this movie actually would have worked a lot better if it were a sequel. But, you know, I digress. Next point. I do actually like the character introduction scenes. They do a great job of giving us, like, this nice visual shorthand that tells us everything we need to know about these characters. Like, when they introduce Mia, she's kind of just in a crowd of people, like all the other cheerleaders, and she's just really standoffish, and you're like, you get a good idea of who she is. Even some of the scenes where they introduce Elle work really well about telling you what this character is like. The problem is that none of these characters are anything like they are in the source material, so that's kind of upsetting. Okay, so the apples. There's no context for the apples in this film. So I understand that in the source material, Ryuk really loves apples because there's nothing like them in Shinigami world, and he becomes addicted to them when he, you know, goes to the human world, and that's kind of a gag because if he goes too long without them, he goes into withdrawals, and he literally ties himself into knots, and it's kind of funny. And then at some point, when Light starts sort of fiddling around and experimenting with what he can do with the Death Note, he leaves a secret coded message for Elle that says, do you know that gods of death love apples? Or, you know, something along those lines. And none of that is actually in the 2017 movie. Like, they don't... Ryuk eats a bunch of apples, but they don't explain why he eats them. He's just kind of just knocking them back. And the first apple you see is actually not even related to Ryuk. It's just sort of sitting on a desk. In fact, it's just sitting on Light's desk while he's in detention. Like, for no reason. There's just an apple on his desk. And the way it's framed feels like it's meant to be a metaphor. Like, they don't give it the context that the manga has, but they frame every shot of this apple as if of the apples as if they are like a metaphor, or they mean something deeper than here's just an apple, but they don't explain it. So I feel like you're meant to sort of interpret the symbology of it. Symbology's not a word. That's a made-up word. Symbolism. You're supposed to interpret the symbolism of what the heck this apple is doing. It feels like it's supposed to be some sort of like Adam and Eve metaphor. You know, Eve ate like the forbidden fruit and they were kicked out of paradise. Well, Light takes the Death Note, in this case the fruit from Ryuk, and he is sort of expelled from whatever his life was. And okay, cool, I guess. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It feels like that's what they're going for, and it doesn't work. and they don't give you the context that the original has for the apples, so they're just there. They're everywhere. I have so many references to apples in my notes. It's ridiculous. Why don't you explain it? Anyway, okay, next point. All right, the acting. The acting is not good. I mean, sometimes it is, but there's a scene really early where Light meets Ryuk and he starts flipping out and running around and screaming, and it feels silly. It feels like a comedy sketch. It feels like a parody. Like, oh, don't take this too seriously. It's just kind of a silly movie. And because it happens so early, it feels like it's setting the tone for this to be just sort of a silly kind of fun movie, and you don't have to take it that seriously. But that tone does not match the rest of the movie. Like, everything just sort of like is super serious and played super straight for the rest of the movie. So it creates this weird tonal dissonance with like the narrative of the film, and I don't like it. Like, it's really weird and kind of makes it hard to enjoy the rest of the movie. I guess we should talk about L in this one. He is not at all concerned with keeping his identity a secret. Like, he actively visits crime scenes and immediately has a press conference where he shows himself and challenges Kira, and he even meets Light at a cafe, kind of for shits and giggles, and reveals his face. And I was like, see, now you know exactly who I am. Are you gonna try and kill me? And it's weird and kind of dumb. Like, in the original, L1 doesn't come off nearly as manic as he does in this version. And like, when he reveals himself, like when he has the press conference, he's not actually at the press conference. And when he reveals himself to Light, it's a calculated risk, and all of the risks this movie L takes feel like they're more just for the sake of taking risks versus like actually getting anything done, which is really obnoxious and sort of counter to his character as a whole. Like, he seems a lot dumber, and I'm not nearly as impressed with any of the stuff he does. And listen, Manga L never visited crime scenes. He did everything over, like, webcam, okay? If he needed someone to actually, like, physically look at clues, he'd just send Watari. So, him being introduced to us by, like, checking out a crime scene is very out of character, and another example of, like, why people are upset because none of the characters act the way they're supposed to. The only part of this movie that feels like it's actually inspired by the original Death Note is the sort of final end sequence where Light saves himself. And it's not even so much the actual sequence itself, it's when he explains it later to his dad in the hospital. And in the original, L and Light both have lots of really convoluted plans to get at each other. And kind of a big part of the fun is watching these plans unfurl and, like, getting the monologues about, like, what's going on and how they work, and that's sort of the fun thing. And you don't get any of that until that last end bit in this movie, and that was the only fun part. I sat through this entire movie and did not have a good time until that scene at the very end. And it was like, I don't know, 3 minutes tops. It's not really worth it. It's not really a good time. Don't recommend it. Alright, so something that didn't bother me too much, but is still sort of problematic, is that Mia and Light, Mia is this movie's version of Misa. Kinda, sorta. They start working together pretty much at the beginning of the story, And I feel like that could work, like a lot similar to when I talked about Saint Seiya. It's really hard to put something like this expansive. Okay, like this is a lot of content, and it can be really hard to put this much into like an hour and a half to a 2-hour movie and have it sort of mean the same thing, because you just don't have time to get into the character depth and the development. And a big part of this series is watching Light sort of struggle with like good and evil and like the power he is given over the lives of other humans. And there's time to go into that and view that internal struggle he has in the manga, whereas the 2017 Death Note is not particularly long, so you can't go in depth like that. So having Mia and Light work together and them being sort of representing different aspects of manga Light's personality works as a sort of easy shorthand to have this sort of metaphor and symbolism with them fighting each other, as opposed to it being like this drawn out internal struggle. It's a great way to have that same sort of metaphor thing going on in a shorter amount of space, because now it's an external struggle that like we as the viewers can watch and it plays out better. And I don't hate that idea, but neither of these characters in this movie are developed enough really for that to work. I mean, Light has a lot more going for him than Mia does, because he's the main character, so we learn a lot more about him. We don't know anything about Mia. I mean, she's a cheerleader, but she's not good at it. She doesn't like it. She doesn't fit in with the other girls, but we don't know why. Like, why is she a cheerleader if she's clearly that unhappy being a cheerleader? Why is she just that unhappy with life? Why is she so willing to slaughter everyone? She instantaneously, she's like, yes, let's go and kill a bunch of FBI agents. Oh, Light's dad is on the news challenging Kira. Better kill him. Like, why is she so ready to do this? Like, they never say, and it's sort of frustrating. So it makes it hard to accept her as a foil of Light when we don't know anything about her other than like she's more extreme than he is, but we don't know why. She just is. And that makes Elle a redundant character, because Elle is meant to be the foil of Light, because they are both like have really strong convictions, but they're on sort of different ends of how to act on those convictions and what like justice really is and that sort of thing. Like that's what Elle is supposed to be. He's supposed to be the opposite of Light. And that's where your external struggle is supposed to be happening. But that doesn't work in this one, because Elle is just a plot device. She's there because, oh, we need to move the story along. This great detective totally put these non-existent clues together, and now Light has to figure out how to deal with it. Cool. It's... Alright. We're gonna have to talk about the fact that this movie is American. Alright. So the original is Japanese. It's set in Japan. It's very Japanese. Light in the original is the smartest kid in school. He gets the best grades, and it makes him super popular, which is a thing in Japan. If you're the smartest kid in school here in America, you generally get made fun of. But, like, if this had been a sequel, I would not have minded them changing the setting, because, you know, hey, we just picked a different place to drop the Death Note. He's already in the human world, so he can drop it wherever the heck he feels like it. So let's pick America next, because Americans are different, right? Let's see how that goes. That would have been fine. It doesn't work in this one, because everything is just over the top. Like, yeah, we're in America now. The press conference that Elle has, that I mentioned like 3 bullet points ago, at some point they sort of zoom in on his face, so it's just him in the frame with this American flag waving majestically behind him for no reason really other than to be like, this is America, damn it. And I just, they put so much time and effort into emphasizing that this is in America that they could be putting into something else. Just saying. Like, they could have, I don't know, focused on character development instead of being like, yeah, hey, America. I'm not thrilled with how the deaths are handled in this version. In the manga, like, having a very specific manner of death for all of his victims was very important to Light, because that's how he was going to show the world that one person was responsible for the death of all these criminals. In this version, they all just kind of die in really weird, convoluted ways. I'm absolutely sure that I've heard someone refer to, like, equate the deaths in this version to the deaths in Final Destination, and they're not wrong. I just recently watched all of the Final Destination movies, and it's really obvious to see just the parallels between how the deaths are handled in that franchise with how they're handled here. They're all just really convoluted and over the top and weird, and it doesn't work for the story. Like, how are the cops supposed to figure out that one guy is killing all of these criminals if they all die in really weird sort of accidental deaths? It's why in this version, Light has to start leaving notes for the police, because otherwise they're not going to know there's a single person committing all of these acts of murder. And if no one can put together that all of these deaths are related, then that means that L has a lot fewer clues to work with, because he's only got, like, known carrot cases, which are just, you know, the ones where he left messages at, and then probably everything after that, and so it makes it hard to believe that he's actually deduced anything about Kira, because, like, there's no evidence. There's none. There's no evidence. And if he's like, oh yeah, nah, this was totally Kira related, like, what's your proof? The guy fell off a boat and drowned. Like, how are you gonna prove that's related to, you know, the 6 other guys that died in really random, weird ways? Maybe not even weird. Like, guy fell off a ladder. Okay, because he's got a criminal background, that must mean he's Kira and not just uncoordinated or bad at using ladders. You can be bad at using ladders. Can you? Yes. The last thing I really need to talk about is Ryoka. In this movie, he's played by William Dafoe, and he is arguably the best thing about the movie. Unfortunately, like all of the other characters, he is nothing like the character he's based off of in the source material. In the original, Ryoka is just a bored Shinigami who just wants to have a good time, so he drops the death note. He has no intention of influencing whoever picks it up. He just wants to see what's gonna happen. He's just along for the ride. Okay, in this one, he's an active participant in the story. Like, he's actively pushing Light to use the death note, giving him advice on how to use it more effectively, and when he's not using it the way he wants, he's trying to get him to pass it on to someone else, someone better qualified to use the death note, like Mia. It's kind of annoying because Ryoka is just this sort of side character. He's not important really to the story, and he doesn't give a shit about anything that's going on as long as he can have his damn apples. What does it matter if Light kills a bunch of people? What if it matters if he and Elle, like, fight each other? Whatever. It's fun. It's silly. Great time. I'm gonna just sit here and eat my snacks. In the end, this movie is not good, which is saying a lot coming from me because I absolutely love watching bad movies. Like, I love watching bad movies. Okay, Pyramid, fantastic. Great time. In fact, I love watching bad movies so much. The second I saw that first Sonic the Hedgehog trailer and the trailer for Cats, I was like, yes, sign me up. I am here to see this quality content. Sonic ended up being much better than I expected, and Cats is just as bad as everyone says it is. The point is, I actively sought out these movies because I have a good time watching bad movies. They can be absolutely ridiculous and a great time. The Netflix Death Note movie is none of that. It's just boring and a really bad adaptation. It could have been a really fun time. Like, if it wasn't trying nearly as hard to be Death Note, it would have been fun. If it wasn't trying so damn hard to be an American version of a popular Japanese IP, it would have probably been fun. Like, it might not have been good, but it would have been fun. Like, it would have been a good time, if not good quality. You know, like one of those movies, you sit down with your friends, and maybe some drinks if you're old enough for that, and you just kind of shit on, like, this terrible acting and the weird convoluted plot, and you just have a good time. You have a great time. There's another bad, cheesy horror movie on Netflix called Polaroid. This is a movie about a teenager who gets a hold of a haunted Polaroid camera. Everyone she takes a picture of ends up getting murdered by the evil spirit possessing the camera. This movie works. I mean, it's cheesy as all get out, but it works. If the Netflix version of Death Note had just been a movie about a kid who finds a notebook and makes a deal with a generic god of death, it would have been fine. It would have been a better movie. All of those things I complained about in my sort of poorly worded bullet points would have not mattered. Okay, the acting and the two-dimensional characters might have still been a problem. The point is, it wouldn't have sucked because it failed to live up to the expectations set by the source material. It could have just been a cheesy horror movie that I had a great time watching because I happen to like watching bad movies. Everyone else could have had a great time laughing at it and making fun of how poorly executed it was. As it stands, this movie is really just a bad adaptation with no redeeming qualities. Admittedly, I don't hate this movie as much as some people do. I don't even hate this as much as I hated the Netflix version of Saint Seiya. Arguably, it's because I'm just a casual fan of Death Note, a casual fan who happens to like bad movies, and still this movie did not work. It's not good. I don't recommend it. Unless you intend to get a whole bunch of friends together with some booze and just rip at anyone. That could be a good time. Actually, you know what? Just watch Polaroid instead. That's an actual good time, especially if you're gonna make fun of it later. You know what, this is probably not great. It's literally just the highlight reel from my notes and like a scripted intro and outro. Emily will like it.